and I'm about to go home. So I'm going to do a RIDEZ in education. In other words, on my way home, I'm going to read an audiobook, and I'm gonna be alive while I do that. Is that clear? Alright. So, said the current book is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. That was a pothole. It's a pothole. Bear with me. So I get this thing rolling, rolling, rolling. Right. Close to where I need to be to stop off this. Alright, alright. One more time, my name is David Hayes. I'm riding home. I'm about to read a book. And you're going to be here with me. Alright. So again, this is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Thank you for joining us. We are the Meta Musee. Yeah.
To tens of thousands who found themselves slipping. But I do know that such a force has come into my life, and that I'm doing all I can to place others in communication. I know of no exception to this rule. The seed of which I speak may not always be observed, but you may be sure it is there in one form or another. I do not pretend to understand all about this strange force which reduced me to poverty and want, and filled me with fear, and then gave me a new birth of faith to which I've been privileged to extend help to tens of thousands who found themselves slipping. But I do know that such a force has come into my life, and that I'm doing all I can to place others in communication with it. During my quarter-century of research into the causes of success and failure, I've discovered many principles of truth which have been helpful to me and to others. But nothing I've observed has impressed me more than the discovery that every great leader of the past, whose record I have examined, was beset by difficulties and met with temporary defeat before arriving. From Christ on down to Edison, the men who have achieved most have been those who have met with the most stubborn forms of temporary defeat. This would seem to justify the conclusion that infinite intelligence has a plan, or a law, by which it hurdles men over many obstacles before giving them the privilege of leadership, or the opportunity to render useful service in a noteworthy fashion. I would not wish to be again subjected to the experiences through which I passed during that fateful Christmas Eve in 1923. And since, on that eventful evening when I walked around the schoolhouse in West Virginia and fought that terrible battle with fear, but all the wealth in the world would not induce me to divest myself of the knowledge I have gained from those experiences. Faith has a new meaning to me. I repeat that I do not know exactly what this other self is, but I know enough about it to lean upon it in a spirit of absolute faith in times of difficulty, when the ordinary reasoning faculty of my mind seems to be inadequate for my needs. The economic depression, which started in 1929, brought misery to millions of people. But let us not forget that the experience also brought many blessings, not the least of these being the knowledge that there is something infinitely worse than being forced to work. It is being forced not to work. In the main, that depression was more of a blessing than it was a curse, if analyzed in the light of the changes it brought to the minds of those who were wounded by it. The same is true of every experience which changes men's habits and forces them to turn to the great within for the solution of their problems. The time which I spent in seclusion in West Virginia was, by great odds, the most severe punishment of my life. But the experience brought blessings in the form of needed knowledge which more than offset the suffering which it cost me. These two results, the suffering and the knowledge gained from it, were inevitable. The law of compensation, which Emerson so clearly defined, made this result both natural and necessary. What the future may hold for me in the way of disappointment through temporary defeat, I of course have no way of knowing. I do know, however, that no experience of the future can possibly wound me as deeply as have some of those of the past, because I am now on speaking terms at least with my other self. Since this other self took charge of me, I have come by useful knowledge which I am sure I never would have discovered while my old fear entity was on the throne. For one thing, I have learned that those who meet with difficulties which seem insurmountable may, if they will do so, best overcome these difficulties by forgetting them for a time and helping others who have greater problems. The value of giving before trying to get. I'm sure that no effort which we extend to those who are in distress can go without some form of adequate reward. Not always does the reward come from those to whom the service is rendered, but it will come from one source or another. I seriously doubt that any man can avail himself of the benefits of his other self as long as he is steeped in greed and avarice, envy and fear. But if I am wrong in this conclusion, then I still have the unusual honor of being one who has found peace of mind and happiness through a viewpoint that was not sound. I would prefer being thus wrong and happy to being right and unhappy. But this viewpoint is not wrong. As long as I remain on good terms with my other self, I shall be able to acquire every material thing that I need. Moreover, I shall be able to find happiness and peace of mind. What more could anyone else accomplish? The sole motive which inspired me to write this book was a sincere desire to be helpful to others by sharing with them as much as they may be prepared to accept of the stupendous fortune which became mine the moment I discovered my other self. This fortune, happily, is one that cannot be measured in material or financial terms alone, because it is greater than everything which such things represent. Material and financial fortunes, when reduced to their most liquid terms, are measurable in terms of bank balances. Bank balances are no stronger than banks. This other fortune of which I speak is measurable not only in terms of peace of mind and contentment, but as manifested in those adept at prayer. My other self has taught me to concentrate upon my purpose and to forget about the plan by which it is to be attained when I go to prayer. I'm not suggesting that material objects may be acquired without plans. What I am saying is that the power which translates one's thoughts or desires into realities has its source in an infinite intelligence, which knows more about plans than the one doing the praying. Stating the case in another way, may it not be wise, when praying, to trust to the universal mind to hand over the plan best suited for the attainment of the object of that prayer. My experience with prayer has taught me that so often all which results from prayer is a plan, if the prayer is answerable. A plan that is suited for the attainment of the object of the prayer through natural and material media. The plan must be transmuted through self without any form of prayer which can be induced to work. A new way to pray. Since becoming better acquainted with my other self, my way of prayer is different from what it was before. I used to go to prayer only when facing difficulty. Now I go to prayer before difficulty overtakes me, when possible. I now pray not for more of this world's goods and greater blessings, but to be worthy of that which I already have. I find that this plan is better than the old one. Infinite intelligence seems not at all offended when I give thanks and show that I am grateful for the blessings which have crowned my efforts. I was astounded when I first tried this plan of offering a prayer of thanks for what I already possessed, to discover what a vast fortune I had owned without being appreciative of it. For example, I discovered that I possessed a sound body which had never been seriously damaged by illness. I had a mind which was reasonably well balanced. I had a creative imagination through which I could render useful service to great numbers of people. I was blessed with all the freedom I desired in both body and mind. I possessed an imperishable desire to help others who were less fortunate. I discovered that happiness, the highest aim of mankind, was mine for the taking. Business depression or no business depression. Last, but by no means least, I discovered that I had the privilege of approaching infinite intelligence, either for the purpose of offering thanks for what I already possessed, or to ask for more, and for guidance. It may be helpful for every reader of this book to take inventory of his or her intangible assets. Such an inventory may disclose possessions of priceless value. Some signs we have overlooked. The whole world is undergoing a change of such stupendous proportions that millions of people have become panic-stricken with worry, doubt, indecision, and fear. It seems to me that now is a splendid time for those who have come to the crossroads of doubt to endeavor to become acquainted with their other selves. All who wish to do so will find it helpful if they take a lesson from nature. Observation will show that the eternal stars shine nightly in their accustomed places, that the sun continues to send down its rays of warmth, causing Mother Earth to yield an overabundance of food and clothing, that water continues to flow downhill, that the birds of the air and the wild animals of the forest receive their accustomed requirements of food, that useful day follows restful night, that busy summer follows the inactive winter, that the seasons come and go precisely as they did before the 1929 depression began, that, in reality, only men's minds have ceased to function normally, and this because men have filled their minds with fear. Observation of these simple facts of everyday life may be helpful as a starting point for those who wish to supplant fear by faith. I'm not a prophet, but I can, with all due modesty, predict that every individual has the power to change his or her material or financial status by first changing the nature of his or her beliefs. Do not confuse the word belief with the word wish. The two are not the same. Everyone is capable of wishing for financial, material, or spiritual advantages, but the element of faith is the only sure power by which a wish may be translated into a belief, and a belief into reality. And right here is an appropriate place at which to call attention to a real benefit which anyone may experience by deliberately using faith and focusing attention upon any form of constructive desire. The mind acts upon one's dominating or most pronounced desires. There is no escape from this fact. It is a fact indeed. Be careful what you set your heart upon, for it surely shall be yours. Faith is the beginning of all great achievement. If Edison had stopped by merely wishing for the secret with which electric energy might be harnessed and made to serve to the incandescent lamp, that convenience to civilization would have remained among nature's multifarious secrets. He met with temporary defeat more than 10,000 times before wresting this secret from nature. It was finally yielded up to him because he believed it would be, and he kept on trying until he had the answer. Edison uncovered more of nature's secrets. They might have been called miracles at an earlier period, in the realm of physics than did any other man who ever lived, and this because he became acquainted with his other self. I have his own word for this, but even if I did not have it, his achievements of themselves have disclosed the secret in their unfoldment. Nothing within reason is impossible to the man who knows and relies upon his other self. Whatever man believes to be true has a way of becoming true. A prayer is a released thought, sometimes expressed in audible words and at other times expressed silently. I have observed by experience that a silent prayer is as efficacious as the one which is expressed in words. I have observed also that one's state of mind is the determining factor when prayer works as well as when it does not.
Thank you all for joining us.
My conception of the other self, which I'd like to describe, is that it merely symbolizes a newly discovered approach to infinite. Is a guardian angel who can open to you at all times the door to the temple of wisdom. The sixth sense comes near as being a miracle as anything I've ever experienced. And it appears so perhaps because I do not understand the method by which the principle is operated. This much I do know. Or first cause, or an intelligence matter, and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. That this infinite intelligence converts acorns into oak trees, causes water to flow downhill in response to the law of gravity, follows night with day, and winter with summer, each maintaining its proper place in relationship to the other. This intelligence may aid in transmuting one's desires into concrete or material form. I have this knowledge because I've experimented with it and have experienced it. I have for many years followed the habit of taking personal inventory once a year for the purpose of determining how many of my weaknesses I have bridged or eliminated, and to ascertain what progress, if any, I have made during the year.
If you could hit the like button.
Chapter 3. A strange...
Quick, this is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. I'm riding home to an audio book. That's what R&E is. It's called RIDEZ N Education. So one more time, thank you all for joining us. If you like this kind of stuff, and we do this often, again, a like button really helps. All right, back to chapter 3.
Chapter 3. A strange interview with the devil. While you are reading the interview with the devil, you will recognize from the brief description I have given you of the history of my life what a desperate effort the devil made to muzzle me before I gained public recognition. You will understand also, after reading the interview with the devil, why the interview had to be preceded by this personal history of my background. Before you begin to read the interview, I want you to have a clear picture of the final fling the devil had at me, and be it remembered with profit that it was this final fling which gave Mercy a chance to turn and twist the devil's tail until he squealed out his confession. The devil's undoing began with the Depression of 1929. Through that fortunate turn of the wheel of life, I lost my 600-acre estate in the Catskill Mountains. My income was entirely cut off. The Harriman National Bank, in which all my funds were deposited, folded up and was wiped out. Before I realized what was happening, I found myself caught up in a spiritual and economic hurricane, which evolved into a worldwide catastrophe of such force that no individual or group of individuals could withstand it. While waiting for the storm to cease and the stampede of human fear to stop, I moved to Washington, D.C., the city from which I made my start after my first meeting with Andrew Carnegie, nearly a quarter of a century previously. There seemed nothing for me to do except sit down and wait. All I had was time. After 3 years of waiting without tangible results, my restless soul began to push me back into service. There was little opportunity for me to teach a philosophy of success when the world around me was in the midst of an abject failure, and men's minds were filled with the fear of poverty. This thought came to me one evening while I was sitting in my automobile in front of the Lincoln Memorial on the Potomac River, within the shadow of the Capitol. With it came another thought. The world had staged an unprecedented depression over which no human being had control. With that depression had come to me an opportunity to test the philosophy of self-determination, to the organization of which I had devoted the better portion of my adult life. Once more, I had the opportunity to learn whether my philosophy was practical or mere theory. I realized, too, the opportunity had come to test a claim I had made hundreds of times, that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. What, if any, I asked myself, were the advantages to me of a world depression? When I began to look for a direction in which I might move to test my philosophy, I made the most shocking discovery of my life. I discovered that through some strange power which I did not understand, I had lost my courage, my initiative had been demoralized, my enthusiasm had been weakened. Worst of all, I was sorely ashamed to acknowledge that I was the author of a philosophy of self-determination. Because deep down in my heart I knew, or thought I knew, that I could not make my philosophy pull me out of the hole of despair in which I found myself. While I floundered in a state of mental bewilderment, the devil must have been dancing a jig or rejoicing. At last he had the author of the world's first philosophy of individual achievement pinned under his thumb and paralyzed with indecision. But the devil's opposition must have been at work too. As I sat there in front of the Lincoln Memorial, reviewing in retrospect the circumstances which had so many times previously lifted me to great heights of achievement, only to let me drop to equal depths of despair, a happy thought was handed over to me in the form of a definite plan of action, by which I believed I could throw off that hypnotic feeling of indifference with which I had been bound. In the interview with the devil, the exact nature of the power by which I had been deprived of my initiative and courage has been described. It is the same power with which millions of others were bound during the Great Depression. It is the chief weapon with which the devil ensnares and controls human beings. The sum and substance of this thought which came to me was this. Despite the fact that I had learned from Andrew Carnegie and more than 500 others of equal business and professional achievements, that noteworthy achievements in all walks of life come through the application of the mastermind, the harmonious coordination of two or more minds working to a definite end. I had failed to make such an alliance for the purpose of carrying out my plan to take the philosophy of individual achievement to the world. Despite the fact I'd understood the power of the mastermind, I had neglected to appropriate and use this power. I had been laboring as a lone wolf instead of allying myself with other and superior minds. An analysis. Let us now briefly analyze the strange interview you are about to begin. Some who read it will want to ask after they finish it, did you really interview the devil or did you merely interview an imaginary devil? Some may wish the answer to this question before they begin the interview. I will answer in the only truthful way I could answer, by saying that the devil I interviewed may have been real, just as he claimed to be, or he may have been the creation of my own imagination. Whichever he was, whether real or imaginary, is of little importance compared with the nature of the information conveyed through the interview. The important question is this. Does the interview convey dependable information which may be helpful to people who are trying to find their places in the world?
This is Outwitting the Devil
If it
by
conveys that
Napoleon
sort
Hill.
of information, no matter whether it is conveyed in the form of fact or fiction, then it is worthy of serious analysis through careful reading. I'm not concerned in the least as to the real source of the information, or as to the real nature of the devil whose astounding story you are. I am concerned only with the fact that the devil's confession of practical benefit leaves will do exactly what he says they will. That is enough for me. So I pass the story of the interview on to you for whatever you may be able to make it pay in useful dividends. Perhaps you will get the greatest values if you accept the devil as being what he claims himself to be, relying upon his message for whatever it may be, and not worrying as to who the devil is or whether he exists. If you want my honest personal opinion, I believe the devil is exactly who he claims to be. Now let us analyze his strange confession. After forcing his way into the consciousness of the devil, Mr. Earthbound began the unwilling interview with not be evaded. Here begins the interview with the devil. I have uncovered the secret code by which I can pick up your thoughts. I've come to ask you some very plain questions. I demand that you give direct and truthful answers. Are you ready for the interview, Mr. Devil?
Yes, I am ready. But you must address me with more respect. During this interview, you will address me as Your Majesty.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
You should know that I control 98% of the people of your world. Do you not think that entitles me to rate as royalty?
Have you proof of your claim?
Yes, plenty of it.
Of what does your proof consist?
Of many things. If you want answers, you will address me as Your Majesty. Some things you will understand, some you will not. In order that you may get my viewpoint, I shall describe myself and correct the false notions people have of me and my place of abode.
That is a fine idea, Your Majesty. Start by telling me where you live, then describe your physical appearance.
My physical appearance? Why, my dear Mr. Earthbound, I have no physical body. I would be handicapped by such an encumbrance as those in which you earthbound creatures live. I consist of negative energy, and I live in the minds of people who fear me. I also occupy 1/2 of every atom of physical matter, and every unit of mental and physical energy. Perhaps you will better understand my nature if I tell you I am the negative portion of the atom.
Oh, I see what you are preparing to claim. You are laying the foundation to say that if it were not for you, there would be no world, no stars, no electrons, no atoms, no human beings, nothing. Is that correct?
True. Absolutely true.
Well, if you can only occupy one half of energy and matter, who occupies the other half?
The other half is occupied by my opposition.
Opposition? What do you mean?
The opposition is what you earthbound call God.
So you have the universe divided up with God. Is that your claim?
Not my claim, but the actual fact. Before this, my claim is true. You will also understand it has to be true, or there could be. I am no beast with a forked tongue and a spiked tail.
But you control the minds of 98 out of every 100 people. You said so yourself. Who causes all the misery in this 98% devil-controlled world if you do not?
I have not said that I do not cause all the misery of the world. On the other hand, I boast of it. It is my business to represent the negative side of everything, including the thoughts of you earthbound people. How else could I control people? My opposition controls positive thought. I control negative thought.
How do you gain control of the minds of people?
Oh, that is easy. I merely move in and occupy the unused space of the human brain. I sow the seeds of negative thought in the minds of people so I can occupy and control the space.
You must have many tricks and devices by which you gain and hold control of the human mind.
To be sure, I employ tricks and devices to control human thought. My devices are clever ones too.
Go ahead and describe your clever tricks, Your Majesty.
One of my cleverest devices for mind control is fear. I plant the seed of fear in the minds of people, and as these seeds germinate and grow through use, I control the space they occupy. The 6 most effective fears are the fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death.
Which of these 6 fears serves you most often, Your Majesty?
The first and the last, poverty and death. At one time or another during life, I tighten my grip on all people through one or both of these. I plant these fears in the minds of people so deftly that they believe them to be their own creation. I accomplish this end by making people believe I am standing just beyond the entrance gate of the next life, waiting to claim them after death for eternal punishment. Of course, I cannot punish anyone except in that person's own mind through some form of fear. But fear of the thing which does not exist is just as useful to me as fear of that which does exist. All forms of fear extend the space I occupy in the human mind.
Your Majesty, will you explain how you gained this control over human beings?
The story is too long to be told in a few words. It began over 1 million years ago when the first man began to think. Up to that time, I had control over all mankind, but enemies of mine discovered the power of positive thought, placed it in the minds of men, and then began a battle on my part to remain in control. So far, I have done quite well by myself, having lost only 2% of the people to the opposition.
I take it from your answer that men who think are your enemies. Is that right?
It is not right, but it is correct.
Tell me something more about the world in which you live.
I live wherever I choose. Time and space do not exist for me. I'm a force best described to you as energy. My favorite physical dwelling place, as I have told you, is the minds of the earthbound. I control a part of the brain space of every human being. The amount of space I occupy in each individual's mind depends upon how little or what sort of thinking that person does. As I have told you, I cannot entirely control any person who thinks.
You speak of your opposition. What do you mean by that?
My opponent controls all the positive forces of the world, such as love, faith, hope, and optimism. My opponent also controls the positive factors of all natural law throughout the universe, the forces which keep the Earth and the planets and all the stars balanced in their courses. But these forces are meek in comparison with those which operate in the human mind under my control. You see, I do not seek to control stars and planets. I prefer the control of human minds.
Where did you acquire your power, and by what means do you add to it?
I add to my power by appropriating the mind power of the Earthbound as they come through the gate at the time of death. 98 out of every 100 who come back to my plane from the Earth plane are taken over by me, and their mind power is added to my being. I get all who come over with any form of fear. You see, I'm constantly at work, preparing the minds of people before death, so I can appropriate them when they come back to my plane.
Will you tell me how you go about your job of preparing human minds so you can control them?
I have countless ways of gaining control of human minds while they are still on the Earth plane. My greatest weapon is poverty. I deliberately discourage people from accumulating material wealth because poverty discourages men from thinking and makes them easy prey for me. My next best friend is ill health. An unhealthy body discourages thinking. Then I have countless thousands of workers on Earth who aid me in gaining control of human minds. I have these agents placed in every calling. They represent every race and creed, every religion.
Who are your greatest enemies on Earth, Your Majesty?
All who inspire people to think and act on their own initiative are my enemies. Such men as Socrates, Confucius, Voltaire, Emerson, Thomas Paine, and Abraham Lincoln. And you are not doing me any good either.
Is it true that you use men who have great wealth?
As I have already told you, poverty is always my friend because it discourages fear in the mind, the physical body, in all parts of the world. Disease has always been one of my most effective weapons. The flock of minds. It is encouraging new and better methods of feeding, clothing, and housing people. It is wiping out the slums in the large cities, the places where my favorite allies are found. It is financing campaigns for better government and helping to wipe out dishonesty in politics. It is helping to set higher standards in business practice and encouraging businessmen to conduct business by the golden rule, and that is not doing my cause any good.
What about these boys and girls who are said to be on the road to hell? Are you in control of them?
Well, I can answer that question only with yes and no. I have corrupted the minds of the young by teaching them to drink and smoke, but they have baffled me through their tendency to think for themselves.
You say you have corrupted the minds of the young people with liquor and cigarettes? I can understand how liquor might destroy the power of independent thought, but do not see what cigarettes have to do with helping your cause.
You may not know it, but cigarettes break down the power of persistence. They destroy the power of endurance. They destroy the ability to concentrate. They deaden and undermine the imaginative faculty, and help in other ways to keep people from using their minds most effectively. Do you know I have millions of people, young and old, of both sexes, who smoke 2 packages of cigarettes a day? That means I have millions of people who are gradually destroying their power of resistance. One day I shall add to their habit of cigarette smoking other thought-destroying habits, until I shall have gained control of their minds. Habits come in pairs, triplets, and quadruplets. Any habit which weakens one's willpower invites a flock of its relatives to move in and take possession of the mind. The cigarette habit not only lowers the power of resistance and discourages persistence, but it invites looseness in other human relationships.
I never thought that cigarettes were a tool of destruction, Your Majesty, but your explanation throws a different light on the subject. How many converts to the habit do you now claim?
I'm proud of my record. Millions are now victims, and the number is increasing daily. Soon I shall have most of the world indulging in the habit. In thousands of families, I now have followers of the habit, including every member of the family. Very young boys and girls are beginning to take up the habit. They are learning how to smoke by observing their parents and older brothers and sisters.
Which do you consider to be your greatest tool for gaining control of the mind?
I would say cigarettes. Once I get a young person to join my 2-package-a-day club, I have no trouble in inducing that person to take on the habit of liquor, overindulgence, and all other related habits which destroy independence of thought and action.
Your Majesty, when I began this interview, I had you all wrong. I thought you were a fraud and a fake, but now I see that you are quite real and very powerful.
Your apology is accepted, but you need not have bothered. Millions of people have questioned my power, and I got most of them at gate as they came over. I ask no person to believe in me. I prefer that people fear me. I am no beggar. I take what I want by cleverness and force. Begging people to believe is the business of my opposition, not mine.
Your Majesty will please pardon my rudeness, but I would not be able to look myself in the face again if I did not tell you here and now that you are the damnedest fiend ever to be turned loose on innocent people. I always had the wrong conception of you. I thought you were kind enough to let people alone while they were living, that you merely tortured their souls after death. Now I learn from your own brazen confession that you destroy their right to freedom of thought and cause them to go through a living hell on earth. What do you have to say to that?
I get what I want by exercising self-control. It is not so good for me, but I suggest you call yourself a thinker, and you are. Otherwise, you would never have forced this interview on me. But you will never be the sort of thinker that frightens me unless you gain and exercise greater control of your own emotions.
Let us get away from it. Please go ahead and tell me of the many tricks you have devised for gaining control of the human mind. What is your most powerful weapon just now?
That is a difficult question to answer. I have so many to say which are the most powerful. Right at the moment here in Washington are helping me to go to killing on a wholesale basis. I shall be able to put into operation my favorite device for mind control. It is what you may call mass fear. I used this device to bring about the other World War in 1914. I used it to bring about the economic depression in 1929. And if my opposition had not double-crossed me, I would now be in possession of every man, woman, and child in the world. You can see for yourself how near I came to world domination, the thing I have been struggling to attain for thousands of years.
Yes, I see your point. Who wouldn't? You are a very ingenious manipulator of the minds of people. Is your devilish business carried on only through people of high position and great influence?
No. I use the minds of people in all walks of life. As a matter of fact, I prefer the type of person who makes no pretense of thinking. I can manipulate that sort of person without difficulty. I could not control 98% of the people of the world if all people were skilled in thinking for themselves.
I'm interested in the welfare of those people who you claim to control. Therefore, I wish you to tell me all of the tricks by which you enter and control their minds. I want a complete confession from you, so begin with your cleverest trick.
This is suicide you are forcing on me, but I am helpless. So settle down and I will place in your hands the weapon by which millions of your fellow Earthbound will defend themselves against me.
Chapter 4. Drifting with the Devil.
For millions of years I have dominated Earthbound creatures through fear and ignorance. Dominated Earthbound creatures through fear and ignorance. Now you come along and will destroy my use of these weapons by forcing me to tell you.
Define the word and tell us exactly what you mean by it.
I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift. Those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. He would rather let me occupy his mind and do his thinking than go to the trouble of thinking for himself. A drifter is one who accepts whatever life throws in his way without making a protest or putting up a fight. He doesn't know what he wants from life and spends all of his time getting a drifter has lots of opinions, but they're not his own. Most of the control to, therefore,
yes, goals.
Call environment as a means of controlling them. This is where.
Sorry about the couple times it cuts out. Again, thank y'all for joining. My name is David. This is RIDEZ N Education. This is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. We made it through a couple chapters this hour, so that's awesome. I may do another one in the morning. I may do a rides and vibes in the morning. Thank you for everybody who's liked this video, and thank you for everyone who's subscribing. I am the founder of the Meta Musee. My name is David, and we're a museum representing artists all over the world. But right now, I'm just on my way home, so just made it. Thank you for coming. Goodbye. Hit the like button for me.